All right, let's talk crafting and let's talk Last Epoch. Last Epoch's crafting simple is really simple, down to earth, and pretty straightforward. I've seen a lot of people talking about the crafting system and it's a little complicated and a little hard to understand, but today my goal is to break it down to you as simple as possible. In Last Epoch, we have the ability to craft at any given time, at any given place, in the middle of an echo, in the middle of a map, in town, out of town, at like your cousin, sisters, brothers, husbands, cousin's nephew Jimmy's house. Like wherever you are at any given moment, you could press the F key, you can open up your forge, and you can start crafting. Last Epoch's crafting system revolves around a couple of things. It revolves around affixes, glyphs, and runes. You can see I have a couple of them in my inventory right now. We have affix shards, we have glyphs, and we have runes. And today I want to do my best to break them all down to you as simple and straightforward as possible. Now, one of the things that I see about Last Epoch and crafting in these shards is people will always say, should I use them? When do I use them? Do I save them for end game, mid game, late game? What is the plan? What do I do and how do I do it? And I'm here today to tell you to just use them. Use them, experiment, have fun. You will find more of them and more and more and more and more and more of them. So if you're leveling your first character, you're starting your first character, you have some items that you want to experiment with, I highly encourage you to open the forge, stick some items in, and give it a shot. But for now, let's talk about it. Let's see what happens. So in Last Epoch, we have a couple of things. We have items, shards, crafting, this, that, this, and that. And let's just pick up a couple of jank items from the vendor for pretty much the purpose of learning. An item at any given point that is dropped on the ground, purchased from a vendor, or that you find, will have something on it called a forging potential, which is that thing right up here. And I'm going to hide my face for this so that you guys can see things. The forging potential is what allows us to craft on the item, very similar to the durability. So what is forging potential and how does that work? When I click on an affix, which are these things right here, to upgrade it, it says that it will cost forging potential. If I choose to add an affix, say chance to bleed, it will cost forging potential. What that means is that this durability, I have to spend some number of this durability to add this to my item. So if I wanted to add the chance to bleed to this scythe and I click this button, it costs me 6 forging potential. You can see it says cost 1 to 10. Now, if I wanted to add, say, damage over time or more damage over time, you'll see it costs 1 to 12. Tiers in Last Epoch, tier 1 being the worst, tier 5 being the best that is craftable. You can get items that go as high as tier 6 and tier 7. You can see that here. But in terms of the basics in the beginning, when we craft, we can craft from tier 1 all the way up to tier... Do none of these have tier 5 on them? Bro, I'm trying to make an example, bro. All the way up to tier 5. Let's put our scythe back. You can actually see this one says tier 7. I was looking for a tier 5 item, but I guess we don't have one. So when I go to upgrade tier 2, you see it says cost 1 to 12 and tier 1 will cost 1 to 10. So this will cost me less to go up. Now you see we've used 4 forging potential and then we use it again. We use another 4 and this item has run out of durability. It is no longer craftable on. If I wanted to craft on an item as I get more resources and I wanted to preserve my forging potential, we start getting glyphs of hope, which give us the opportunity to craft without using forging potential. So durability, and this saves durability, you know, the hope of not using durability. So if I were to craft and I were to hit this button, we get unlucky, and then we get unlucky, and then, ooh, look, we saved it. And now you see we have tier 5 is the max amount that we can have, and we do it again and we use our forging potential. So that is the basics of forging potential and what forging potential does. Each item has prefixes and suffixes. What does that mean? Essentially, each item, as you see, I'm just going to throw stuff on here randomly. Each item can have 2 prefixes and each item can have 2 suffixes. And if you don't know what can go on where, when you put an item in and you click on the little plus button, you could look at the prefixes and suffixes from these buttons at any given time. Eventually, with crafting and playing the game, you'll figure out what's a prefix and what's a suffix. But if you just kind of want to explore what you have, you just click on the prefix button and you could see what can go on the left here. And then for suffixes, you would do the same thing and click on the suffixes. Now, to bring things into a bit more of a complicated stance or to go things up, if we have forging potential and we want to upgrade this health regen per second, we see that it can go between 1 and 24, but this endurance goes between 1 and 10. So there is a world where I can click on this. Oh, we use no forging potential. We use one forging potential. We use one forging potential. There is a world though where I can click this and we have the opportunity for a critical craft. So what does that mean? That means I have the opportunity to upgrade a lower tier mod. And if I get lucky, a big if I get lucky, I'm trying to just force it now to see what would happen. Of course, it's not going to work when I want to like show it, but essentially what can happen, okay, or don't, just don't work either. It's fine. Essentially what can happen is I can go to upgrade lower tier items. There you go. +1 to shock. It worked. Essentially what can happen is you can upgrade lower tier items in an attempt to critically craft bigger ticket items. So there is a world where that is a reasonable strategy. Now let's pick up some more items so we can do some more demonstrating and testing. So if we take this shield here and we look at the forging potential and we add our glyph of hope, we can then add a prefix, say block chance. See, we use very little forging potential, and then we can add another one, say block effectiveness, and see we use very little forging potential. So now we have a 4 modded item. It has a little bit of forging potential left. Now when it comes to crafting, I can pretty much just sit here and choose how I want to do things. If I get lucky, glyph of hope procs, and we just use no forging potential. If I'm still really lucky, we use very little forging potential, and I can just go around and start crafting an item the way I want. Now, what you'll notice right away is items that we get from a vendor have extremely little forging potential. But when you start running a map and you start looking around, you'll notice this item has 43 forging potential. This item has 36 forging potential. This has 38 forging potential. As you start playing the game and getting more items and finding things on the ground, you're going to have items that have way, way, way more forging potential that'll allow you to do more things and things easier. So you'll be able to take an item like this, for example, that has just health and armor and 44 forging potential. So if I really wanted to, I could just pretty much add whatever I wanted to this. And having 44 forging potential allows me to really be able to upgrade and modify my piece of gear pretty much to my heart's content. Now, in terms of other things, sometimes you'll be out of shards. I have tons and tons of shards. The COF faction, which if you haven't seen, I have a video on COF, gives you tons and tons of shards and tons of materials. Same thing with Merchant's Guild, you get a little bit less, but you'll end up with tons and tons of shards. But in the off chance that you don't have, say, damage over time shards, you can actually shatter your items in an attempt to get damage over time shards. Last Epoch's crafting has the ability to pull the shards off of items with runes of shattering, where I can just shatter things and get affix shards that I need that are sent right to my forge. That in itself is really, really kind of cool and interesting. Now, if you guys have copied loot filters, you'll notice on your loot filter, you have the opportunity to recolor items that you want for shattering and removaling. What this means is that if I have an item, for example, this, and I shatter it, I have a chance of getting melee damage and void damage. You see, we get both of them there. If I take this item with 4 mods and I shatter it once again, we get 4 mods, but that is not always the case. When it comes to shattering, sometimes you won't get all 4 mods and you'll get a little unlucky. If that does happen, then you feel bad. So Last Epoch's way around this is something called a rune of removal, or if you've played Path of Exile, this is your typical annulment orb. Pretty much what this says is that it will remove a random affix on an item and return an equal number of shards to you. So we can use our glyph of hope because this uses forging potential. And if I remove this health on kill, we get exactly 6 shards. But if I were to shatter this, for example, and we get both of these, I might not get 3 of these shards or 4 of these shards. You see that we only got 1 chance to stun shards. So you want to really pick and choose. If you have an item that is good to shatter, you want to shatter. And if you have an item that has a rune on it that you really want to keep, or an affix that you really want to keep, you're going to want to try to target it with the rune of removal. Other glyphs and other runes that are really good is we have the rune of refinement. This is your typical divine orb. This will re-roll all the values of an item. Yes. So for example, if I go to the shop and I buy a couple more things to experiment with, and I grab this axe and I hold Alt on it, you can see the increased necrotic damage goes from 70 to 96. The damage over time goes from 19 to 38, and the suffixes go from 3 to 3. If I put this rune of refinement and I use my glyph of hope to reduce the forging potential, I can then roll the values of my item, and you see that our necrotic damage went up, our damage over time changed, and our attributes stay the same. And I can do it one more time, and you see the necrotic damage went down again. So that's runes of refinement. Your runes of discovery will add in every empty slot, it'll add something that is missing. So what that means is that if I have a white item like this and I put on the rune of discovery and I click it, it'll add a bunch of stats to an item, which is really good. Then we have, what else do we have? We have the rune of shaping. This will re-roll all of the implicits on an item. So essentially what that means is if you have an item, say this axe, for example, the increased cold damage has a roll range from 41 to 134. If I put on this rune of shaping, that roll right here on top, if I press it and it shapes, you can see that roll has now rolled to a 70% cold damage. We do it again, it's an 89, and now we're out of forging potential. Other glyphs that are included, we've looked at shattering, we've looked at refinement, we've looked at removal, discovery, shaping. We have a rune of ascending. This one's actually kind of one of my favorites. This allows me to take an item and then ascend it into a unique. These uniques can have the opportunity for forging potential. These ones are really fun to play with and really good to use really early in a cycle, or if you're looking for something specific, say you're looking for a ring, or like for me, I was looking for Firestarter's torch earlier. You could take shields. You can pretty much just take any item at all and pretty much just ascend it into something. In terms of Weaver's Will, by the way, for anybody asking, Weaver's Will is the mod that says while I use this item, it'll gain affixes. So equip your Weaver's Will items and kill things and see what happens. It's a really good time. The last two runes are really interesting. Rune of Creation is the typical Mirror of Kalandra for all the Path of Exile players in the room. This will essentially allow you to duplicate a perfect item, but it'll make the forging potential essentially 0. You will only use this in theory on items that you want to slam into uniques. Essentially slamming into a unique, it revolves around legendary potential. That's too much to cover in this video, and we can make another video. So if you guys want to know about legendary potential and crafting and the dungeon and how to do all that, please leave a comment down below and I'll happily walk you guys through all that. And then lastly, we have the Rune of Research. Rune of Research allows you to seal an experimental affix on an item. What does that mean? Have you ever gone through the game and you're just kind of like putzing around and you see this mod, these blue mods, these affixes, the experimental affixes? These pretty much come from the mages that are running around. And if I put on a Rune of Research, if I have an experimental affix in one of these slots and I use a Rune of Research, it'll seal it. This is a 100% chance to happen. It happens every single time. So if I find an item with a mod on it from an experimental, that's that little mage in the little prison that you release, and I use a Rune of Research, it'll seal it. This means that this sealed item is permanently on this forever, and no matter how I modify this item, it will never lose this mod unless I shatter the item. So no matter what I do, this will stay on. These Runes of Research are very good, especially if you're playing a build like mine that needs to use an experimental affix. You want to make sure that you seal it onto your item, and then this will allow you to open up a bunch of slots to pretty much do whatever you want. The same thing can be done here. I actually don't have one right now, which is the glyph right here. This is the Glyph of Despair, which will be this one, and this one will allow you to seal an affix. So you look at my grail here, you see that I have sealed tier 1 endurance threshold, and then I was able to craft on other things. The lower the tier, so for example, if I put this on, the lower the tier of the modifier of an item, the easier it is to seal. Now you'll say to me, but wouldn't you want to seal a tier 5 affix? And you're right, you would probably want to seal a tier 5 affix, but it's very hard. But say you have this scepter and you want critical strike chance, damage over time, or say for example, you have damage over time, chill, poison, but this critical strike chance modifier doesn't really fit the theme of damage over time. So we have chill, poison, and damage over time, but critical strike chance, because we're playing a dot build, doesn't make sense. And I would pretty much rather have almost anything else in that prefix spot. and just say we wanted, I don't know, elemental damage, right? Or we wanted cast speed, or we wanted attack speed, because critical strike chance doesn't do anything. Sealing and guaranteeing a seal of tier 1 critical strike chance onto it will free up this slot to allow us to do whatever we want. So essentially, I don't have the glyph to demonstrate, but imagine this is rune of removal is, and I would just click this, it would have removed or had a chance to remove what I want, and then it would be permanently sealed on the item, very similar to these gloves. So you'll be able to seal items away, and you'll be able to add a new suffix or a new prefix, depending on what you remove from the item. And it becomes extremely powerful and allows for a lot of creativity with your items, and essentially just allows you to have 5 modded items. It becomes really powerful in the long run of things. Another really cool thing, you know, something I didn't mention about earlier, something I want to point out, you have a crafting material tab. You just press transfer all crafting materials, everything goes into your tab, and you feel pretty good about yourself. But essentially, that's crafting in a nutshell, broken down the most basics of levels. Crafting in itself can be a lot more complicated, and you can do a lot of really interesting, fun things and make a lot of really nifty items that, you know, pretty much goes advanced, especially when you do things like critical crafting, or you start sealing different things, or you specifically tailor an item to use for legendary potential. But we can save all that for another video. For now, I just wanted to make something very simple, very down to earth, very basic, to pretty much just showcase to you guys that crafting in Last Epoch is really straightforward, and you guys should be using your runes and your affixes right away. You shouldn't really be hoarding them, because I know I did, and it hurt me in the long run. And if you're thinking about playing this game, or you're playing this game now and your gear doesn't feel good, or like you want to reroll, grab some gear off a vendor, start slamming some affixes into it, and just kind of go kill things, or pick things up the floor and just start slamming things into it, because you never know, you might make one hell of an item. For now, friends, if you found this video interesting and you like these kind of guys or these kind of things, please by all means leave a like, a comment, a share, do all that fun stuff for the YouTube algorithm, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. So long, friends. Bye.